Our next session, right along the theme of where we've been, a lot going on politically, a lot of change and turmoil in the past few months, and the impacts at the federal level are reverberating throughout our economies. And so we're going to shift gears now and hear from a range of panelists that are going to help us think through how the conservation community can help and shape this very chaotic time moving forward, and to set the stage for this conversation about how change happens, because we're in the midst of transformative change. And whether it's individuals, whether it's societies, whether it's communities, whether it's nations, whether it is continents, Akaya Windwood is going to help frame the conversation about how we think about that in our individual and our collective capacities as we move forward and make the work that we're doing not slow down and not stop and not and for us not to be deterred, to leave this place knowing that we will not be deterred from what we know needs to happen. So we have Akaya joining us virtually.
Thank you, Happy. Thank you, folks, for inviting me to talk a little bit about this. My name is Akaya Windwood. I live here in Oakland, California, land of the Ohlone peoples in California. So back in the middle 60s, 1966, and for some of you that will sound like way back in the dark ages, when in some ways it was, I was living with my family in San Bernardino, California. And this was during the days where the schools were segregated. And Black kids went to Black schools and, white kids went to white schools, and everybody was separate. And my parents were civil rights activists, and along with other civil rights activists in the community, decided to challenge the segregation. And it took a couple of years, but what ended up happening was the white powers that be, or were at the time, had no interest at all in making desegregation work. But they organized, the Black community organized, and what they decided to do, or what we were allowed to do, was to send two Black kids per white school. And so I remember getting on that bus. There were 8 of us because there were 4 white schools. And we were allowed one kid from K through 3, one kid 4 through 6 in each school. And I remember getting on that bus, not knowing where we were going. And they dropped us off 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. And I remember getting off the bus, never having been to the school before, had no idea, and they sent me to a classroom. And the teacher sat me by myself over to the side, and no one spoke to me for about 3 months. And that was going on, not just me, it was what was happening there. And until after winter break, this new girl comes into the classroom, and she's this wild, red-haired Jewish girl. She looked as different from them as did I. And the teacher sat her next to me. And she looked around at one point and turned to me, and she saw kind of what was going on. And she said, "Can we be friends?" And the world became 3-dimensional again. I was seen. Oh my goodness, I still get a little verklempt when I think about what that meant. Her name was Jill Schoen, and I have lost track of her, but I'm hoping, if I tell this story enough, somebody's going to say, "I know Jill, let me connect them." I can't imagine what it felt like to be a parent, what it meant to send your kids off into what you knew is hostile territory, and to do it nonetheless because you were committed to the world being different than it was. This was 1966. I was in 5th grade. in the ensuing 8 years, San Bernardino built a brand new high school, and it was the kind of the crown jewel of the high schools, and it was up in the hill up the hill, and they made it so that 1/3 of the student body was Black, 1/3 was white, and 1/3 was Anglo, as we called it then. In fact, we were proud of calling ourselves Chiblango, which is Chicana, Black, and Anglos. And we patted ourselves on the back that we were all of that. I tell that story because there is no way that my parents or the community could have imagined that in 8 short years, we would have gone from complete segregation to a crown jewel of a high school where that kind of, we're all in it. I like Ken was talking about familia, that we are all family here. So it was hard. Let me be very clear. It was really hard, especially for young kids to not be seen or talked to, even by their teachers, for months. But we persevered, and the world is different as a result of it. I graduated as a valedictorian, and I'm not so much proud of that as I am saying that that would never have been possible had we been relegated to the old ways of you're over here, we're isolated from each other. In a few minutes, you're gonna hear a conversation about we can do hard things. And the key word here is we. Sure, it will be hard. It was hard on me. Maybe it was hard on my family. I'm sure it was. But it was in the context of we, the full community that later became this larger community. And I know that we are in a moment here, particularly, well, in North America, we're in a politically very, very tricky moment, and it's going to call for bravery. It's going to call for intention, and it's going to call for community, perhaps in ways we've never been asked for before. So, perhaps, and I say we, I'm talking about those of us who are alive now because our ancestors have been through it. Let us be clear. So we're going to get a chance to hopefully lean on the strength of our ancestors, lean on each other, and do some really hard things. So I'm going to turn this now to Leslie. And as a beginning question for the panel, I'd love to I invite you to talk about when you've chosen to be brave, and perhaps in the context of
Kaya, can I
community.
interrupt you for just a second? Let's get the panelists up
Okay.
stage.
Great.
Leslie Harroun will lead this panel, and if the panelists would make their way to the stage. I like the way you work. Let's get right down to business. I appreciate it. So we will hear from this panel the charges that you've given us about creativity and inclusiveness and courage and paradigm shifting, led by our moderator, Leslie Harroun.
Okay, good. Thank you for that story, Akaya. That was very powerful. And please continue.
Well, so my question is for you all is to tell a story like mine when you chose to be brave, and it wasn't just you alone, and what happened as a result of it. And I don't want to put you all in a position of doing the you, but these stories I think are important because they set the tone for what we might collectively do. So tell a time when you were brave and that bravery set us free.
Okay, does anybody want to start? Yeah, go ahead, James. Oh, I should probably introduce you. Sorry. And actually, so I had planned this out a little bit differently. Why don't you tell your story, and then we'll go through, and I have
people can read about you. This is James Calabaza. I'm not going to remember your last names. Patricia Nash on the end, and Laura. Say it. Martinez. Thank you. So let's answer the question, and then I have a very distinct way that I want you to introduce yourselves. Go ahead, James.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm James. I'll leave it at that. James Calabaza, or Jimmy Pumpkin for you Spanish speakers. I have a similar story to Akaya, where I come from the Santo Domingo Pueblo Reservation in north central New Mexico in the United States, where it's a tribal reservation, low economic outputs, no jobs, high rates of substance abuse, alcoholism, but our cultural heritage remains strong and intact. I took a leap of faith in 2011 when I became the first in my family to go to a 4-year Western public institution at Colorado State University. Thank you. Taking that leap of faith, made me travel 400 plus miles away from my family, away from my culture, away from my safe zone, going to a pretty dominant white community in Fort Collins and establishing roots there, educating myself, assimilating myself to a Western society and cultural values really shaped who I am today. And then, through those, the fruits of everything have led for me to be here with you all this morning and be active in this participation and these conversations. And it takes me back to that skinny, fragile, timid, scared boy back in 2011, where it's like, I have no idea what kind of world I'm going into. My family was scared with me. And, today I feel like I've overgrown, or I've overshadowed that fear to where now I become, I'm seen as a leader in my community, and seen a leader both in Fort Collins and Santo Domingo Pueblo as a way to create a pathway or a model for future young adults to be able to take that same journey. But yeah, I'll leave it at that in terms of a story where I had to be brave and leave my family, be away for 4.5 years to be able to obtain a degree just so I can be able to sit in the same spaces as Western conservationists. And today, I get invited to come to these kind of conferences, which is kind of interesting because it kind of goes back to the DEI piece of, indigenous peoples are needing to be placed in these type of settings and conversations.
Awesome, thank you. Laura?
Thank you. I come from a quite different family, very safe childhood, wealthy enough so that they can support whatever I want to do. So when I was 8 years old, I told my family I want to become a primatologist, and I didn't change my mind. And after living between Mexico and France, when I finished my master, I was about to start my PhD, and I already had a scholarship and everything for that. And then suddenly I thought, this is not what I want to do. This is what everybody is expecting from me. All my family has done long studies, so it's my time to do my PhD and to become the primatologist I have always said I will become. And I decided that this is not what I wanted to do, because I actually wanted to save the world. And I decided to jump in an opportunity for being a volunteer in Africa in a project of chimpanzee reintroduction. I had no idea what I was doing, and I did not save the world, but I'm still here trying to do so.
Thank you. Trish?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So my mother's family is Haudenosaunee from Southern Ontario. We've been going across borders since time immemorial from Ontario to northern New York State. I think as Indigenous people, we have to be brave every single day. Throughout our lives, similar to you guys, I was the first person in my family, excuse me, to go to university. I was raised on the land and water. And so my family was like, it just makes sense for you to go to university, which I did. And this was in the 1980s. I quickly realized that my indigenous worldview was completely different from Western science. I had to reconcile, like, every single day, my place in the world. I was being taught that we were to be dominant. We didn't have emotion when it came to the environment. It was hard just even being a woman in a field of science. And I could really relate to someone who said, you know, they went into a conference or whatever, and they would look at me and say, oh my God, like, are they letting women into this now? Or they would come to you and say, are you the secretary here? So I think all of those experiences, living in reserves, having to deal with violent situations, makes us really strong, brave people. And for our communities, we want and need to be brave.
Thank you all. Yep. I suspect that this room is populated with a group of people who have all been very courageous in their lives in one way or another, or we wouldn't all be here. When we talked on Zoom about this call, we didn't give you the questions beforehand. I was struck, but we did sort of introduce ourselves. And I was really struck by how each of you spoke about the importance of a landscape or a community to your own identity and purpose. Would you talk a little bit about yourselves by telling us where you work now, and by sharing a little bit about yourself through your personal landscape or community and how it shaped you as a person in your work?
Oko atse hopa shotsa nahana shokim momas ki wa hashte charisata toria te kakim skunko socha te sotsa tasati et ari kakim skunie shomati sokyumich tiriki tiniko et tiri mine et kokyumit at ianitor autoria tati et new peshoma. Hello, everyone. Officially, my name is James Calabaza. I'm a proud citizen of Santo Domingo Pueblo. I speak our indigenous language of Keres, who Ariel and I over here share the same language. And it's just a traditional way of introducing ourselves to everyone, especially here on the ancestral and living homelands of many of the First Nations peoples in British Columbia. My landscape, definitely is the Jemez Mounds of north central New Mexico, a dry mixed conifer forest that was once a beautiful forest that, provided the livelihoods of our people, water, fish, habitat, as well as wild game. But unfortunately, these last 30 years, with the advancement of climate change, fires have really disturbed the functionality of these landscapes and threatening our way of life. But what I remember back to my youth was the fresh smell of western ponderosa pine, mule deer migrating from place to place, like kind of symbolizing the act of, freedom and resilience in regards to how to live with Mother Nature and the natural world. And today, I still think about those childhood memories, and what I was able to learn through traditional ecological knowledge or place-based knowledge is that is always going to be home. That's going to be the roots to the foundation of my knowledge, my experience. And today, working with Trees, Water, and People in Fort Collins, Colorado, I am blessed and fortunate to be able to work with my communities back in north central New Mexico, specifically the Pueblos, or tribes. Those tribes have taken on the name of Pueblos to honor themselves from what the first Spanish contact had labeled them. Working with them has been a true blessing as we restore and protect and preserve the East Jemez watersheds, and that landscape that I just mentioned has been decimated by natural or human causes, because it's not just ecological preservation, it's not just hitting that 30 by 30 target, it's hitting 300 plus years of cultural languages, foods, livelihoods, and that's something I carry with me is this is not short-term. We're not looking for short-term outputs, short-term benefits. We're looking at long-term trajectory items. And that's going to outlive me. That's going to outlive all of us. But I think the important thing is to note that how do we want to carry that and carry that message on to our future generations?
Thank you. Lara.
Gracias, Leslie. Buenos días, amigas y amigos de América del Norte. También quiero pasar a otro idioma. Je voudrais parler en français parce que je sais que c'est la deuxième langue du Canada et que nous avons des amis québécois ici, québécoises. Bonjour les filles. I will shift to English. So I'm very fortunate to be seated between two indigenous people. I am not an indigenous people from any place, so I have always been welcome to hometown or homeland of somebody else. That makes me migrant, I guess, intergenerational migrant. That has been the history of my family for several generations. And I have been very fortunate to being growing, but because I still feel I'm growing and learning from cross-pollination of all these places I have lived in and all these different cultures I have nurtured by. And thank you for the slide, it makes me more comfortable. And by the way, this is La Paz, a city that Ambassador Salazar knows very well. And I really love Stanley Park and Vancouver. This is a beautiful city, and thank you to all the people of this city to open my eyes on so many beautiful thoughts and feelings.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, again, growing up near Six Nations Reserve, just outside on the traditional territory of my ancestors, it was just our way of being, was being in nature and feeling comfortable and surrounded by all of our relations. I lived there until I was in my 20s, but there was a lot of racism at that time. And so my mother didn't really feel comfortable about letting people know that we were Haudenosaunee or Iroquois. So I escaped and I went up to the Northwest Territories. And ever since then, I've been working on Indigenous sovereignty in the North, in Quebec, in Labrador, and now I am in Mi'kma'ki. And it doesn't matter where you go on Turtle Island, you feel safe with other Indigenous people. People that know how to work in a collective, know the importance of territories of life, know the importance of working with one another, know the importance of family, and know the importance of nature to our future generations and to the future of all of us that are living in this world on Mother Earth.
Thank you. And just out of curiosity, how many people in this room feel like they have a very deep, deep connection to a landscape? That's what I thought. Yeah. So let's move to the concept or practice of conservation. And this is the last question I'll ask all of you, and then I'm going to break it up a little bit. What does conservation mean to you? And this is an intergenerational panel, by the way, and we did that on purpose. And I would love to know, as you think about that, how, if at all, you've seen the concept of conservation change over time, and how you would like to see it change going forward, if at all.
Yeah, so when Leslie mentioned intergenerational, you can probably tell I'm the millennial here. So definitely I have less stripes on my shoulder compared to Laura and Trish in terms of being, on this planet and how I work in the conservation world. But I'll start off that, the term conservation was, definitely new and foreign to me when I first heard it, because my first language is actually Keres, and then English my second. And in our language, we don't have a word that directly goes to conservation. It's more steward. So I always in my head, it becomes a complex puzzle of am I a conservationist or am I a steward? Because steward is, takes on a different track of responsibility. It's, something you're born with. Conservationist could be something you build out as a career. As a steward, kind of as for indigenous peoples, we're born into it. There's no way of getting out. And that's something we always tackle in our conversations with our indigenous and tribal partners and networks is how do we frame it? Are we conservationists? Are we stewards? Definitely a lot of pushback from tribal people in regards to the term conservation, because conservation could mean, are we conserving the natural resources for the benefit of the United States political agenda? Are we conserving natural resources for the priorities of our tribal people? Are we conserving, resources for that mission and creation of more parks for people to come and, experience and enjoy? So what does that mean? It's those are the questions that, come up in our conversations, because truth be told, not all indigenous tribal communities are 100% sold that conservation is the right term, because as I mentioned, we are born into this world as stewards. So kind of bringing in that concept of we moving forward has to be conservationists of practices that are still very foreign to us today, such as seeing, personally, I know this panel was also create a place to bring up some of the true feelings, true thoughts of how we feel about conservation. Personally, I enjoy and also dislike seeing artifacts, seeing things that are in museums that were probably once forcefully taken or were not addressed or asked for permission by these communities. But then I also see the benefit of being at the Anthropology Museum when people do gift, certain gifts to the people to experience and to see. And for me, is that also conservation? Is conservation meaning that we can get to keep all these artifacts in these museums, or can we return these artifacts back to the people? Again, not trying to push buttons, not trying to make, people, I hope people get uncomfortable with it, to be honest, but these are the things that, my constituents talk about at a very place-based scale, is because we are still trying to figure out, are we conservationists, or can we just label ourselves stewards? And in the funding world, when we write write proposals, where I was we're, I guess, conservationists, so because we need that $10,000 to keep our operations going. But conservation can be different across the landscapes. I think on our call we were talking about it could mean something differently in Mexico, it could mean something different in Canada, and then the US. There's probably no uniform practice of conservation. And I think that's the beauty of the work we're all in, is that diversity in action, diversity of knowledge and thinking. And I encourage all of us to look at how do we incorporate cross-pollination of the term conservation into our day-to-day operational work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shoshana, could you help me with the next slide, please? Or yes, thank you. We all know cultural diversity and biological diversity are two faces of the same coin. I don't have to explain more to this public, we all know that. And I felt almost ashamed when I visited the Museum of Anthropology here in UBC and having a mother that is social anthropologist, to feel for the first time that objects had the same fate as the animals I've been working on for a very long time, in captivity, into the wild, and with some animals that has been taken away from their family and are trying to being reintroduced. Most of the time it's not possible. And I had this this young guide, indigenous guide at the museum, talking about the mixed feeling of being proud of this object in the museum, and at the same time feeling that it's not their place. And they are living objects. And even in this piece and in this quote that I put here, I introduced the unliving beings. It wasn't there. The fact that we can consider these objects legal documents. And another quote was, land is our constitution. And it is the same for the animals in the zoos, in zoos, and I have never seen this connection before. So conservation to me, although I now completely integrated that cultural, linguistic, and biological conservation or aspects has to go along and be treated as in an integrated way. It's much more, it's wider than I thought, and so that we really have to reconsider this conservation. And I finally had, even that we had this pre-conversation, it is only 3 days ago when I arrived to the museum that I understood, coming from a country that has a huge cultural living diversity, but only seeing this object, I felt that there's something that really has to change from the very first fundamental way of our mental structures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't like terms like conservation, stewardship, sorry, Jimmy.
All good.
Management. If you've ever worked with me, I hate all those colonial terms. Conservation to us is life. I heard yesterday about, conservation finance. And I went home, I went to my son's apartment last night. He's a student here in Vancouver. And my daughter is also with me, who is a nurse in a First Nation community. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to say tomorrow? They're like, just speak from your heart and tell people what they need to hear. I've worked across, again, Canada, working with Indigenous nations and organizations. When we go and say, we'll get money from government, philanthropic organizations, go up, we need to develop a stewardship strategy for Unama'ki. And we would go into the communities and they're like, stewardship? Is there a similar word? No. You go and work with the Mi'kmaq and you say, stewardship? No. My community, stewardship? No. It's our responsibility. Our responsibility to our communities and to Mother Earth. We were given these gifts from the Creator, and we are responsible to ensure that they continue for the next 7 generations. If you want the biggest return on your investment, and you talk about supporting Indigenous-led conservation, invest and trust in Indigenous communities. We know we are resilient. We know how to work with tyrannical patriarchy. We have, when we were talking on Zoom, we were like, oh my God, what's happening? My God, we have been dealing with this for hundreds of years.
Yep.
We have had our land stolen. We have had our children stolen. We have had our resources stolen. Many of these foundations that have the money have made those dollars off the backs of Indigenous people and Indigenous lands.
Yep.
Why do we have to jump through hoops to get money to show that we are doing this right? Colonial fortress conservation does not work. We are in this situation because of it. I have been spending a lot of time with Elder Albert Marshall, who I hope most of you know. He came up with the concept of two-eyed seeing. He is so wise. And he continues to say to us, we have to speak out. We are in a crisis situation. We don't need to talk anymore. We don't need more assessments. We need to act. We talk about two-eyed seeing. He says, where are the examples? We need examples of, at UINR, we are doing nature-based solutions. We're doing ecosystem services. We're doing connectivity. We're doing Indigenous protected and conserved areas. To us, it is all the same. It is our responsibility to Mother Earth. We do need really good allies, and we have a lot of them. And as Indigenous people, we are banding together across the world and supporting each other because we are the ones that know how to do conservation, ecosystem management. We see people as part of the ecosystem. We don't look at environments as healthy unless there are people there. These concepts are not new. I just talked to Stephen last night, Stephen Nita, and he's like, my God, we've been collecting this information for thousands of years. Like, how much more information do you need? But we can't even get our knowledge recognized. So we need support, financial and others. We don't feel comfortable hobnobbing it in all these, even like the activities last night. I cannot go to those and hobnob. First of all, I don't want to be around alcohol. And second of all, I don't know how to do the hobnobbing. If you can help us with that, great. I just really think this is the time where we really need to think about what we need to do moving forward and act on it. I'm sorry. I'm just like, my kids were like, you have to say it. We haven't talked anything about youth. That's a whole other issue. I work with so many Mi'kmaq youth who are so wise, who really deserve a chance, who have been suffering. When you hear some of the stories, it's just heartbreaking. They feel at home on the land as guardians, as technicians, as managers, and we need more of that.
Thank you so much. And I want to say that this panel was designed to be a courageous place for people to speak out, and we made the distinction on our call between being a courageous space and being a safe space. And I think what each of them has represented up here right now is this is not the time for us to be safe anymore. That I so deeply appreciate your courage in speaking from the heart, and I think we all need to do that a little bit more. And Trish, you have blown my questions out of the water. But I do want to start with you as the elder and the wise person. I mean, you are all wise on this panel, and just what would those conversations look like? What would it look like to have a conversation That's truly important and difficult. And what would make them a success for you?
I think you need to do your homework. I think you need to know your history. I think you need to learn about what meaningful partnerships are. I also think we are tired as Indigenous people of teaching non-Indigenous people and governments and organizations and philanthropic organizations how to be allies with First Nations. You know, we're working with governments. The staff turnover. We have to go right back to square one. This is the history. These are the treaties. This is what you're, in Canada, we have constitutional rights. On Earth, Indigenous people have rights, international rights, under UNDRIP. We are the people that you want to work with. I mean, we can make things happen. We have rights. Nothing can happen in Canada without consultation with First Nations organizations. I went to, I think it was the last Salazar in Colorado, and they were like, oh, well, you want to come in this group that's talking about connectivity and stuff? And so I was the only Indigenous rep. There are all these groups, all these Angos talking about, we're going to do connectivity from here and there. And I put my hand up, I'm like, have you talked to First Nations organizations? No, you're never going to do any of this without First Nations. We need to have the hard conversations, know your history, know that there is a legacy of colonialism in our communities, and we are not trustworthy of every person that comes in to our communities. We need relationships based on trust. We need, when I heard the person talk about this trust financing or funding, I was like, what a concept. We need more of that. The Rights Relationships Collective is amazing, but that's only in British Columbia. Every nation is different in Canada. You have to make the effort to go to community, go to powwows, feel uncomfortable, and make relationships that are lasting, because we've had so many people come into communities, so many government officials with lots of promises, and they've never, ever been followed through on. It's hard for our elders to trust. It really is. And it's hard for our young people to trust. And we're trying to build bridges. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans has an awful legacy with First Nations groups, and we are working with them on a marine protected area to co-govern an existing marine protected area and then develop a new Indigenous protected and conserved area that is terrestrial and marine, sky, spirit. Yeah, most government people are like, what the heck? I can't even get my head around that. But bringing people and spending time on the land with us is transformational for most people. I really encourage you, if you want conservation to work, reach out to your local Indigenous group. Yes, they might not return your call right away, but try and build a relationship. It's the only thing that is going to save this world.
Thank you. Thanks. And James, I want to move next to you, and we're quickly running out of time. When we spoke, you said you wanted to fight, and you have the energy to do that, I suspect, and you would love to create some uncomfortable spaces to have these conversations. What would that look like for you, and what do you imagine success would look like?
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. When I meant fight, I didn't really mean physical. I was more of like, let's challenge each other across the table. But I mean, hey, I've been in meetings when people actually have thrown fists at each other, but more agenda items were advanced in that way, which is old school diplomacy, as they called it. But in terms of, I mean, first I want to just really echo and thanks Trish for everything you said. Talking with my community and constituents is like when January 20th happened, or more so November, 6th, 7th, they were not really thrown off the rails because they're like, what? New president? Right-wing agenda? It's like, that's been happening for 400 years. What's different now? Like, life's gonna go on. Their whole thing is survival. They don't really care about political agendas, who's in Washington, et cetera. But, we need to definitely create more spaces where the agenda items are prioritizing tribal needs, tribal thoughts. What do they want out of, the 30 by 30? And then for me personally, like nature-based solutions, some of these fancy academic scientific terms is traditional ecological knowledge. And I always say, like, doing these type of work on the ground is TEK, but we never provide that reference. We never honor, the knowledge that where it originated from. But really, it's creating those spaces where challenging conversations can take place. And I really appreciate like Akaya and everyone on our panel saying that a safe space is so different for all of us. Me being a man on this planet, maybe my safe space may be different for a woman on this planet, but it's creating a space where we're asking folks to be courageous, be willing to, be an active listener. An elder once told me, we gotta listen twice as much as we talk, because that's why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We have to be able to listen more, and that means listen to our tribal constituents, because they have knowledge that we can utilize to their respect in regards to how much they want to share, that will allow us to meet our targets for the future, because they have knowledge that goes back generations, millennia, that predates the first data sets that Western or colonial science has ever recorded. I know my time's up, but I encourage everyone to really put yourself in a position to be more of a listener and a student, and then go to these tribal communities. Don't just send an email or send a letter like asking for a time to meet virtually. Drive that 2 hours, that 6 hours. I know it's gonna be a time commitment, but if you really wanna build trust with these communities, be in the community. And then more than likely, you'll get some food out of it. That's my experience. So think about it as a win.
All right, we're gonna end with you, Laura. You are a true global citizen. You've worked across many fields, and you've worked on international agreements. And when we spoke, you said you were disappointed and tired of business as usual. What would new business look like?
Thank you. Could you help me with the slides again, please? Yeah, so I've never really felt identified in any political movement, although I think we are all political beings and we have to be involved somehow. And when I read this book from David Jais, who is from France and Algeria, he proposed this territorial New Deal centered around local territories and communities. And I like it because it's, yes, let's do hard things, but we may not, it might not be the best way to make a revolution and a lot of violence and a lot of humans being killed. So we can build upon what already exists, and this model offers the idea that democracy and capitalism can coexist as long as, and this is why I don't identify myself in any political movement so far, as long as Mother Earth, Pachamama, land, river, whatever you call the creator, is reestablished as the center of our world. As long as there is no political movement that puts environment, however you call it, at the center of the world, I won't feel identified. Can I have the next slide, please? So David Jais talked about this incompatibility triangle that has been created by an economist, Danny Roderick, and I just would like to emphasize that we have to keep fighting, because so this incompatibility triangle says that it is not possible to have the three sides of the triangle balanced together. So always two sides of the triangle are going to be stronger than the third one in any country. And there's three things that I think we should really think as with hope, is that the nation concept is being held up currently by nationalist populists, and we have to take it back, because a strong nation is much more than isolationism and whatever they want to tell us about a nation. And yesterday, Thomas talked about the monocrop phenomena that I think resume very well all the challenges and all the problems we have from globalization. And vibrant democracy is declining. I think the last survey said that around 15% of US citizens believe in democracy. So what are we talking about? What's democracy? And the next slide, please. So my proposal is, let's make it compatible. And I did this triangle yesterday after my Mexican friends forced me to go to dinner and have some drinks. I still did this afterward. Thank you. So we need community-managed lands, oceans, and resources. No more tragedy of the commons. That's an invention from capitalism. We need to innovate into social systems and communication, and I will end up with that. Let's have dynamic governments. And we haven't mentioned this yet, but we are more women than men in this room, and we are the women finally leading organizations, both on the cultural and biological conservation world, and it was time. So it doesn't mean feminist, and it doesn't mean a fight against men. It means that we need feminine-driven leaderships. And finally, we need local sources of identity, food, and knowledge. It doesn't mean that we cannot share our knowledge, but we need to change the way we are fed by the knowledge. And I don't think we should always outsource more and more our intelligence from the internet, and now our brain is not enough, so now we have artificial intelligence to keep one part of all our knowledge somewhere and all our intelligence, and this is just demanding more and more natural resources, and it has no sense at all. And the next slide, please. So I want to finish as a primatologist, which I am somehow. We are champions of strategic adaptations because of our intelligence, because of the huge diversity of social systems we have developed. The symbol of the trinational relationship between our three countries is always, for me, the monarch butterfly. We have this 1 gram being has a trinational passport. You can see it on the picture. That passport was created by our scientific people. Why do this 1 gram monarch butterfly has a passport created by human beings to travel between the three countries, and we cannot create that for us? Who says that? It is ourselves. So we really have to think out of the box and to do hard things, and simply with this kind of simple changes. And finally, we are the only primate that has colonized all ecosystems. You can see on the map that the distribution of all other primates. So we are the only one that has adapted to all kind of ecosystems and has all kind of behavioral adaptation. I want to finish with this two quotes. One is from a man that is an anthropologist and archaeologist and has worked for a long time with ranchers, and he was talking about climate change. What kind of simple actions can we do again to adapt to climate change in arid ecosystems? Let's take a nap when it's too hot. Instead of putting on the AC conditioner, let's take a nap, as people has done it for hundreds of years when the weather was too hot. And I had the fortune to visit an Aboriginal nation in Australia, and the leader said, we were here 30,000 years ago when the sea raised, and we survived. So don't come to tell us how we should survive to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ambassador Salazar spoke this morning about transformation and inspiration, and you are all very different people, and you have different skills and different talents, and I just want to, and you all have enormous courage. Thank you for sitting up here and telling us the truth from your point of view. I really appreciate that. And I think it feels so good to hear the truth, doesn't it? It feels very transformative, and I think we need to speak the truth with courage if we're going to move forward. And so thank you very much for modeling that.
And thank you for creating the space for us to
Thank
speak.
you, Leslie.
You're very welcome.
Wonderful.
All right, let's give them a big hand.